They said the dirt in Louisiana was made of gold. They said a piece of paper could turn a pauper into a prince. And for one brief, fevered moment in the early 18th century, an entire nation believed it had discovered something close to heaven on earth. But history is unkind to such moments, because there are times, rare, combustible, and devastating, when a single idea slips into the bloodstream of a society and begins to spread, quietly at first, respectably. It arrives dressed as progress, as salvation, as inevitability. It speaks the language of reason, of mathematics, of certainty, and in doing so, it disarms even the cautious. It invites not skepticism, but participation. The Mississippi Scheme was one of those moments. It did not emerge from ignorance, nor from desperation alone, but from a far dangerous combination: intelligence, ambition, and belief. It took hold in France at the height of the Enlightenment, among people who prided themselves on logic, on discipline, on their ability to see through illusion. And yet, they leaned forward, they reached out, they believed. At the center of it all stood one man, John Law of Lauriston, a gambler who understood probability, a theorist who understood money not as metal, but as confidence, a visionary who realized that wealth could be expanded not by digging it from the earth, but by printing it into existence. And for a time, he was right. Fortunes appeared where none had existed. Paper multiplied. Prices soared. Paris pulsed with the electricity of sudden wealth. The poor became speculators. The cautious became reckless. The entire nation began to dream. But they forgot one thing. Wealth, when untethered from reality, is not wealth at all. It is a story, a shared illusion. And illusions, no matter how beautiful, have a habit of breaking. When they do, the numbers vanish first, then the fortunes, and finally, the people who believed in them. I'm Sharon. If you've ever seen a sure thing turn into a disaster, you're in the right place. Before we drift deeper into the wreckage of the 1720s, pay the toll. Subscribe so you never miss a journey through history's darker currents. And speak from the depths. Tell me the greatest bubble you've witnessed in your lifetime: crypto, housing, or something more personal. I read every confession eventually. Now, let us watch the money burn. Why does this story matter now? In the 21st century, an age of algorithmic trading, derivatives layered upon derivatives, and financial systems so intricate they resemble cathedral architecture, the world of John Law can seem almost innocent. Paper notes, royal charters, colonial speculation whispered through candlelit salons. But the instruments are a distraction. Because if you strip them away, the powdered wigs, the courtiers of Versailles, the distant promise of Louisiana, what remains is something deeply familiar, uncomfortably so. A nation drowning in debt it cannot repay.
a brilliant outsider offering a solution that promises to make the burden disappear. A public starved of opportunity, eager, desperate to believe. And beneath it all, a system held together not by gold, but by confidence. This is the template. It begins slowly, rationally, even elegantly, and then it accelerates until, without warning, belief turns and everything built upon it begins to fall. This pattern did not end in 1720. It did not end with the Mississippi Scheme. It echoed in the South Sea Bubble. It was chronicled in extraordinary popular delusions and the madness of crowds. It resurfaced in the crash of 1929, in the dot-com euphoria of 1999, and in the quiet mathematical catastrophe of the 2008 global financial crisis. Different centuries, different technologies, the same architecture. But the stakes in 1716 were far greater than a market correction or a lost portfolio. France was not merely an economy in distress. It was the dominant land power of Europe, a cultural and political force that shaped the very rhythm of the Western world. Its ambitions stretched across oceans, from the Caribbean to the vast, untamed arteries of North America. And yet, beneath this grandeur, the foundation was cracking. The long shadow of War of the Spanish Succession had drained the treasury to exhaustion. Decades of war under Louis XIV had left the kingdom burdened with debts so vast they could no longer be serviced by conventional means. The state could not raise taxes without provoking unrest. It could not inflate its currency without destroying trust. It could not default without risking political collapse. It was trapped, a fiscal cage with no visible exit. And it is here, at this precise moment of maximum pressure, that history becomes most dangerous. Because this is when radical ideas stop sounding reckless and start sounding necessary. Into this crisis stepped John Law, not with an army, not with conquest, but with an idea so deceptively simple, so mathematically seductive, that it promised to turn debt into opportunity, to transform paper into wealth, to rebuild a nation, not through austerity, but through expansion. And for a moment, it worked, which is precisely why it matters. Because the relevance of this story is not confined to the past. In the years following the 2008 global financial crisis and accelerating through the crisis of COVID-19 pandemic, the world's central banks engaged in interventions of a scale once thought unimaginable. Trillions created, markets stabilized, systems preserved. Necessary, perhaps, but not without consequence. Institutions like the Bank for International Settlements have warned, quietly but persistently, of the distortions created by prolonged low interest rates, of asset prices untethered from underlying reality. Reports from the International Monetary Fund have tracked a steady, almost methodical rise in sovereign debt, levels not seen since the aftermath of global war. The tools are more advanced now, the safeguards more complex, the language more precise, but the underlying dynamic has not changed. This is the uncomfortable truth that echoes across centuries. Whenever a system attempts to resolve deep structural imbalances through financial innovation operating at the edge of belief, it enters dangerous territory. Because confidence is not a constant, it is a variable. And when it shifts, when faith in the system falters, the consequences are never contained to numbers on a page. They ripple outward, into economies, into societies, into lives. The Mississippi Scheme was not just a bubble. It was the first time an entire nation placed its future into a financial construct built on engineered confidence. And when that confidence broke, it did not simply correct, it collapsed. And what followed would leave a mark not just on France, but on the very way the modern world understands money itself. Now, let us descend further into how the dream was built.
To capture the dream was sold, we must first understand the ruin it was built upon. And to see that clearly, we must go back, further than John Law, further than the Mississippi Scheme, back to a king who believed that power, true power, was something to be displayed. Louis XIV, the Sun King. He ruled for 72 years, longer than any monarch in the history of Europe's great powers. And during that time, he did something extraordinary. He turned France into the center of the world. Versailles glittered. French culture dominated. Its armies marched across the continent with terrifying precision. But beneath the gold, there was strain. Because even before Louis, France had been wrestling with a quiet contradiction, one that would haunt it for generations. A monarchy that spent freely, and an aristocracy that paid almost nothing. The burden of the state fell, as it so often does, on those least able to bear it. And yet, for a time, the system worked. Much of that stability came from one man, Jean-Baptiste Colbert. Colbert was not a dreamer, he was an architect. From 1665 to 1683, he constructed a financial machine grounded in discipline and control, a system we now call mercantilism. Industry was nurtured, trade was regulated, infrastructure expanded, the navy grew. France began to resemble something modern, something efficient. Revenue increased, production flourished, and for a fleeting moment, the books balanced. But systems like this depend on one fragile condition: restraint. And Louis XIV did not believe in restraint. War for him was not merely policy, it was identity. The Franco-Dutch War, the 9 Years' War, and most devastating of all, the War of Spanish Succession. Each conflict demanded more soldiers, more ships, more money. And slowly, inevitably, the system began to break. Colbert's careful architecture had never been designed to withstand this level of strain. Borrowing increased, confidence eroded. The crown began to reach for solutions that felt familiar. Offices were sold, taxes multiplied, though rarely touched the powerful. The currency itself was quietly altered, reduced, stretched. What we now call inflation, seigniorage, financial engineering. The language changes, the behavior does not.
debt accumulated, layer upon layer, until it reached a scale that defied comprehension. By the time Louis XIV died in 1715, the numbers told a simple, brutal story. A state owing between 2 and 3 billion livres against annual revenues that could not even begin to service the interest. It was not a liquidity problem, it was insolvency. A kingdom that could no longer sustain the illusion of its own finances. And into this fragile moment stepped a new figure, not a king, but a caretaker. Philippe II, Duke of Orleans, the regent. Where Louis had been absolute, Philippe was analytical, curious, unusually aware of the limits of power without resources. He understood something many rulers do not, that the greatest threat to a state is not invasion, but arithmetic. He inherited a system that could not be taxed into balance, could not be cut into recovery, and could not default without risking collapse. He needed something else, something unconventional. And he knew, perhaps before others did, that conventional solutions had already failed. Because somewhere, moving through the courts of Europe, there was a man who had spent years refining an idea most rulers had dismissed as dangerous or absurd. A man who saw money not as metal, but as motion, not as weight, but as trust. John Law, a gambler, a theorist, a salesman of systems no one had yet dared to implement. The meeting of John Law and Philippe II, Duke of Orleans, was not an accident. It was convergence. Supply meeting demand in the marketplace of ideas. And like all such meetings, it carried within it the potential for transformation or catastrophe. Now, let us witness how the system itself was born.
Before the system, there was the man. Before the paper, there was the idea. And before the idea, there was a boy, born in 1671 in the cold, disciplined city of Edinburgh. John Law was the son of a goldsmith, which in another age might have destined him to a life spent weighing metal, counting coins, measuring value in ounces and certainty. But irony has a way of shaping history, because this boy, raised among gold, would spend his life proving that gold was not the foundation of money at all. When his father died, Law inherited not only wealth, but knowledge, the quiet mechanics of early banking, the kind that did not yet call itself banking. Goldsmiths at the time performed a delicate function. They stored wealth, they issued receipts, and over time they noticed something subtle but revolutionary. Not everyone came back for their gold, which meant more claims could exist than gold itself. A receipt could circulate, a promise could be traded, value could move without metal ever leaving the vault. It was a simple observation, but like all dangerous ideas, it expanded. From that gap between what existed and what was believed to exist, emerged something new, money, created from confidence, a primitive form of what we now call banking. And for John Law, this was not merely a curiosity, it was a revelation. His early adulthood carried him south to London, a city alive with risk, ambition,
and the intoxicating mathematics of chance. Here, law became something else, a gambler, not reckless, not blind, but calculated, precise. He understood probability not as luck, but as structure, as something that could be studied, exploited, bent. At the gaming tables of the 1690s, he refined two skills that would define his life: the ability to read risk and the ability to read people. He was, by all accounts, a striking figure, tall, composed, effortlessly charismatic, the kind of man who could make belief feel reasonable. And then, in a single moment, everything changed. In April 1694, over a dispute that history records only dimly, a woman, an insult, a matter of pride, John Law killed a man, Edward Wilson. A duel, the kind of violence that was, in that era, both ritualized and final. The consequences were immediate: conviction, a sentence of death, then a reprieve, reduced to manslaughter, and then escape. Law fled England, not as a thinker, not as a theorist, but as a fugitive. He would never return. Exile, however, can be a peculiar gift. Freed from the constraints of one nation, Law moved through the financial centers of Europe like a man assembling a puzzle. Amsterdam, Paris, Venice, Genoa, Turin. Each city offered a different piece of the same question: what is money really? In Amsterdam, he observed the stability of the great exchange bank, a system built on discipline and trust. In Italy, he saw networks of credit stretching across city-states, binding commerce together without the constant movement of coin. In France, he saw weakness, instability, opportunity. And everywhere he went, he noticed the same pattern. When credit expanded, trade flourished. When money contracted, economies suffocated. The supply of money was not passive, it was active. It shaped reality. This realization, filtered through his mathematical mind and gambler's intuition, began to crystallize into something larger: a theory, a system, a belief that money was not gold, not silver, but a relationship, a mechanism of trust. In 1705, he gave that belief form, a pamphlet, Money and Trade Considered. It was, for its time, a startling piece of thought. Law argued that economies did not stagnate because they lacked resources, but because they lacked money. That scarcity of currency constrained trade, employment, and growth, and that this scarcity could be solved not by mining more gold, but by creating money, paper money, backed not by metal, but by land. A system where value flowed from assets into circulation, expanding the economy itself. To modern ears, it sounds almost familiar. Echoes of later theories, whispers of ideas that would not be formalized for centuries. But to his contemporaries, it was radical, too radical. The Scottish Parliament declined. They saw the risk, or perhaps they lacked the desperation. But ideas, once formed, do not disappear. They wait, they circulate, they find new hosts. And over the next decade, John Law refined his vision, sharpening it, expanding it, carrying it from court to court like a merchant of possibility. Most rulers listened and declined. The idea was elegant, but dangerous, until it reached a man who had run out of alternatives. Philippe II, Duke of Orléans, a regent with a broken system, a thinker with a radical solution. The meeting was inevitable, because what Scotland could afford to reject, France could not. And when the offer finally came, not to theorize, not to propose, but to act, John Law did not hesitate. He had spent 20 years preparing for this moment. Now, he would attempt something no one had ever attempted before, not just to explain money, but to remake it. And in doing so, he would set in motion a system so vast, so ambitious, that when it finally broke, it would shake an empire.
Every great financial system begins not with numbers, but with a mind. And the mind behind this one was born far from Versailles, in the colder, quieter world of Edinburgh. John Law was not born into nobility, nor into power. He was born into precision, the son of a goldsmith, a keeper of weight, of measure, of certainty, a man whose profession depended on the simple idea that value could be held, touched, verified. And yet, from this world of metal and certainty would emerge a man who would argue the opposite, that money is not gold, that value is not weight, that wealth is belief. When his father died, Law inherited more than fortune. He inherited access to the hidden machinery of early finance, because goldsmiths in that era had already begun to uncover a quiet truth. Not everyone reclaimed their gold, which meant receipts, mere pieces of paper, began to circulate as substitutes for metal. And slowly, imperceptibly, a transformation began. More claims existed than gold. More money existed than substance. And yet, it worked, because no one questioned it. This was the seed, the realization that money could be created, not mined, that credit could expand reality itself. A dangerous idea, and John Law understood it completely. In London, he refined that understanding, not in lecture halls, but in risk. At the gaming tables of the 1690s, Law became something rare, a gambler who did not believe in luck. He believed in probability, in patterns, in behavior, in the mathematics beneath human decisions. He learned that people do not act rationally under pressure, that confidence can be manufactured, that belief can be guided, and perhaps most importantly, that systems can be designed to exploit both. He was charismatic, controlled, intentional, the kind of man who could make others feel as though they understood something just before they committed to it. And then, as so often happens in lives like his, violence intervened. In 1694, a duel, a man named Edward Wilson, a dispute history barely remembers, with consequences it never forgot. Law was convicted, sentenced to death. The sentence was reduced, but before resolution could arrive, he escaped and fled, not as a thinker, but as a fugitive. Exile scattered him across Europe, and in doing so gave him something far more valuable than safety: perspective. In Amsterdam, he studied stability. In Venice and Genoa, he observed credit networks that stretched across borders. In Paris, he saw weakness waiting to be restructured. Everywhere, the same pattern emerged. When money expanded, economies breathed.
When it contracted, they suffocated. Money was not passive, it was active. It shaped reality. And slowly, over years of observation, calculation, and risk, his ideas took form. In 1705, he wrote them down, Money and Trade Considered, a proposal that was, for its time, almost unsettling in its clarity. Law argued that nations did not fail for lack of resources, but for lack of money, that scarcity of currency suppressed trade, employment, and growth, and that the solution was not more gold, but more money, created deliberately, backed by land, circulated as paper. A system designed not to reflect the economy, but to expand it. To modern ears, it feels familiar, but to his contemporaries, it felt dangerous. The Scottish Parliament refused him. They saw the risk, or perhaps they simply had the luxury of caution. But ideas do not vanish when rejected. They evolve, they wait, and for a decade, Law refined his vision, carrying it across Europe, offering it to rulers who listened and declined, until finally it reached a man who could no longer say no. Philippe II, Duke of Orleans, a regent with a collapsing system, a thinker with a radical solution. This was not coincidence, it was convergence, because when crisis reaches its peak, the improbable becomes acceptable, and the dangerous becomes necessary. When France opened its doors to John Law, it was not merely hiring a financier, it was inviting an idea to take control, an idea that had never been tested at scale, an idea that would attempt something unprecedented, to rebuild an entire nation using confidence as its foundation.
What followed was not a policy, not a reform, but a system. Layered, interconnected, deliberate. A machine designed to generate prosperity from within itself. To understand its rise and its collapse, we must understand how it was built. The foundation was laid in 1716, the Banque Générale, France's first true bank of issue. It accepted deposits, it extended credit, and most importantly, it printed money. Not recklessly, not at first, but with precision. Its notes were backed not by political decree, but by fixed weights of silver. Unlike the monarchy's coinage, which could be altered at will, these notes offered something rare: stability, trust. And so, something remarkable happened. People preferred paper to metal. Confidence began to shift. But the bank was only the first layer. The second was ambition. In 1717, Law established a trading company, the Compagnie d'Occident, later transformed into the Mississippi Company. It was granted monopoly rights over Louisiana, a vast, mysterious territory, rich not in proven wealth, but in promise. And that promise was enough. Shares were issued, and crucially, they could be purchased using government debt. Debt that had been nearly worthless suddenly had a purpose. Value was being restored, or perhaps reimagined. Then came the expansion. The company absorbed more monopolies: tobacco, African trade, Asian commerce, until it became something unprecedented, a commercial empire on paper. By 1719, it controlled nearly all of France's overseas trade, and as its scope expanded, so did belief. But the true transformation, the moment the system crossed into something far more dangerous, came next: the fusion. The company absorbed the national debt,
converted it into shares. Investors would no longer be creditors of a failing state. They would be shareholders in a thriving enterprise, at least in theory. New shares were issued, demand surged, prices rose, and then something began to feed on itself. Rising prices attracted buyers. Buyers drove prices higher. Higher prices validated belief. A loop, self-reinforcing, unstoppable as long as confidence held. Meanwhile, the bank evolved. In 1718, it became the Banque Royale, now backed by the authority of the state itself. And with that change, a limit disappeared. Money could now be created without constraint. When share prices faltered, more money was printed. When demand surged, more liquidity was supplied. The system could sustain itself, at least for a time, because it had become something entirely new, a closed loop of confidence, money supporting assets, assets justifying money, both reinforcing each other. It was, in many ways, a work of genius, the first true attempt to unify central banking, national debt, corporate enterprise, a complete financial ecosystem. But it contained a flaw so subtle it was almost invisible. Its success depended not on what existed, but on what was believed to exist. The wealth of Louisiana, the profits of empire, the future returns that would justify the present expansion. None of it had been proven. None of it could be proven fast enough. And so the system rested on a single fragile pillar: confidence. And confidence is never permanent. What John Law had built was not just a financial system, it was a reality sustained by belief. And like all such realities, it would hold right up until the moment it didn't. Now we begin to watch it strain.
Every bubble has a moment when belief begins to hesitate. Not collapse, not yet, just doubt. And once doubt enters the system, everything that follows is merely time. What unfolded in the spring and summer of 1720 was not a sudden crash. There were no alarms, no instant collapse. Instead, something far more dangerous. A slow, grinding, unraveling. A system attempting to save itself, and in doing so, destroying itself. At the center of it all still was John Law. And to understand his failure, one must first understand something uncomfortable. His response was not irrational. In fact, it was, in theory, almost correct. Faced with falling confidence, Law did what many modern systems would attempt. He tried to manage the decline, to slow it, to control it, to prevent panic from becoming collapse. But theory is fragile, and reality rarely cooperates. In February 1720, Law made a decisive move. He merged the bank and the company. Money and speculation became one. The Banque Royale and the Mississippi Company were fused into a single structure, a total system, complete control, no separation between the creation of money and the value it was meant to support. At the same time, he issued a decree. Company shares would function as legal tender. They had to be accepted. Confidence would be enforced. But here, something subtle shifted. What had once felt like opportunity now felt like coercion. And when people feel trapped
inside a system, they do not relax. They look for exits. The response was immediate. Not visible panic, but acceleration. Selling increased. Conversion into real assets intensified. Because the message, though unintended, was clear. If belief must be forced, it is already failing. Then came May, and with it the fatal decision, the most sophisticated and the most destructive. John Law announced a controlled devaluation. Shares would be reduced gradually from 10,000 livres to 5,000. A managed descent, a soft landing, a return to reality without catastrophe. On paper, it was elegant. In practice, it was devastating. Because the moment the decree was announced, the illusion broke. The state itself had admitted the truth. The prices were not real. The wealth was not secure. The system was unstable. And once that truth is spoken aloud, it cannot be contained. Panic followed. Not chaos at first, but urgency. Selling surged. Confidence evaporated. The decree was reversed within days, but reversal does not erase revelation. The damage was done. Then came the moment every financial system fears most, the point of no return. The Banque Royale stopped converting paper into coin. Withdrawals were halted. In any era, under any system, this means one thing: the promise can no longer be honored. And with that, the descent accelerated. 10,000 became 5, 5 became 3, 3 became 1, and still it fell, back toward the beginning, back toward reality. But numbers alone do not tell the story. Because the true collapse was human. The great aristocrats, the earliest participants, escaped. They had entered early. They had exited early. They converted paper into land, into gold, into permanence. They survived.
But below them, the real cost was paid. Merchants, lawyers, artisans, servants, the people who had believed, who had traded savings for shares, who had accepted wages in paper, who had sold land to buy into the dream. They were left with nothing. Paper that no longer held value, businesses built on vanished capital, lives recalculated overnight. The shock was not gradual. It was compressed. Months, that was all it took to transform wealth into absence. And something deeper broke alongside it. Trust. Not just in the system, but in the very idea of financial innovation. For decades afterward, France would carry a suspicion of paper money, a reluctance to believe in anything that could not be held, weighed, verified, a scar left by belief itself. As for John Law, he understood before most that it was over, that no policy could restore what had been lost, and perhaps more importantly, that systems like this always require someone to blame. In December 1720, he left France, quietly, with the permission of Philippe II, Duke of Orléans, a man who had once commanded the economy of Europe's greatest power, now departing
with only a fragment of his former wealth. He returned to the road. Brussels, Copenhagen, Venice, London. Always thinking, always proposing, always refining the same idea, that money is not metal, that systems can be designed, that economies can be engineered. But no one would trust him again, not with implementation, only with theory. He died in 1729 in Venice, 57 years old, not in power, not in wealth, but not forgotten, because what he had attempted had not failed because it was foolish. It had failed because it was too early, too large, too dependent on perfect conditions. And this is the final lesson of collapse. Systems built on confidence do not break when they are weakest. They break when they are no longer believed. The Mississippi Scheme did not simply end. It unraveled, thread by thread, promise by promise, until nothing remained but the memory of what had once seemed inevitable. And from that memory, the modern financial world would quietly begin to learn. Now, we step back and ask what it all meant.
It is tempting, when looking back at the Mississippi Scheme, to ask a simple question. How could they not see it? How could an entire nation believe in something so fragile? But this is the wrong question, because it assumes distance. It assumes superiority. It assumes that we would have behaved differently. The truth is far less comforting. The people who bought into the system of John Law were not fools. They were not uniquely naive. They were rational. The prices were rising. That was real. The state endorsed the system. That was visible. Friends, neighbors, colleagues were becoming wealthy. That was undeniable. And the promise of Louisiana, distant, vast, unknown, was not absurd. It was plausible. Given the information they had, the incentives they faced, the world they could observe, their decisions made sense, individually. And this is the first lesson that echoes across centuries. Financial disasters are not driven primarily by irrational people. They are driven by rational people operating inside irrational systems. Systems where the logic works, right up until it doesn't. This pattern did not end in 1720. It evolved, it repeated, it refined itself. Consider the architecture. What John Law created was not just a bubble, it was a fusion. Money creation, government debt, asset prices, all bound together into a single, self-reinforcing mechanism. Now, shift forward 3 centuries. After the 2008 global financial crisis, central banks around the world undertook something extraordinary. They expanded the money supply massively through a process known as quantitative easing, purchasing government bonds, supporting financial markets, stabilizing asset prices. Institutions like the Federal Reserve expanded their balance sheets from under $1 trillion to nearly $9 trillion, an intervention of staggering scale. Necessary, perhaps, but structurally familiar, because the mechanism is the same. Money creation,
supporting asset values to prevent systemic collapse. Organizations such as the Bank for International Settlements have warned carefully, quietly of the consequences. Distorted risk, artificially elevated asset prices, debt that survives only because conditions remain unusually favorable, and beneath it all, a growing dependence on confidence. The sovereign dimension is even more direct. At its core, law's system attempted to solve a simple problem: too much debt and not enough capacity to repay it. So the debt was transformed, converted, imagined as investment. Now the scale is larger, but the arithmetic is unchanged. Nations carrying debt levels once associated only with crisis. Economies balancing growth, inflation, and stability within increasingly narrow margins. The tools are more sophisticated, the institutions more resilient, but the underlying equation remains the same. And history offers a warning, not as morality, not as condemnation, but as pattern. In 1720, even as France surged, another system emerged across the Channel, the South Sea Bubble, nearly identical in structure, a company, a monopoly, a conversion of debt into shares, a rising market sustained by belief in future profits that never arrived. This was the moment the pattern revealed itself. It was not cultural, it was not accidental, it was structural. Later, in manias, panics, and crashes, this pattern would be formalized, a cycle: displacement, mania, distress, collapse, a rhythm that has repeated across centuries with unsettling precision. And this is the deeper lesson of the Mississippi Scheme. It was not an anomaly, it was a prototype, the first full expression of a system that would appear again and again whenever certain conditions aligned. Debt without easy resolution, innovation without restraint, confidence without verification. We like to believe we are more advanced, more informed, more protected, and in many ways we are. But advancement does not eliminate structure, it only changes its form. Because as long as systems exist where belief drives value, where confidence sustains prices, where the future is used to justify the present, the architecture remains, waiting. And when the next system begins to strain, when confidence begins to flicker, when reality begins to diverge from price, the question will not be, how could they have believed? It will be, how long before we notice we are doing the same? The Mississippi Scheme is not just history, it is a mirror. And like all mirrors, it does not show us the past, it shows us ourselves. Now, we arrive at the final question. What, if anything, can be learned from the ruins?
When the system finally collapsed, when the paper dissolved, when the crowds disappeared from Rue Quincampoix, one question remained. Not how it happened, but who it happened to. Because financial crises are never equal. They do not distribute pain randomly. They follow structure. They follow information. They follow power. At first glance, the Mississippi Scheme looked like a shared disaster, an entire nation rising and falling together. But beneath that surface,
the outcomes were anything but equal. At the top of society, the story was very different. The great families, the established financial houses, the well-connected, they entered early, when prices were low, when belief was still forming, and more importantly, they exited early, before the collapse. They converted paper into reality. Land, gold, foreign assets, property, things that could not evaporate. And when inflation surged, when paper money flooded the system, it was these assets that absorbed the value. Prices rose, and those who already held real assets grew wealthier still. Meanwhile, below them, the mechanism reversed. The merchants, the artisans, the professionals, the workers, they entered later, when prices were high, when confidence felt certain. They held paper, and when the system broke, they had nowhere to go. What looked like prosperity had been a transfer, a movement of real purchasing power from those who trusted the system to those who understood it. This pattern is not unique to 1720. It is one of the most consistent features of financial history. When money expands rapidly, those closest to its creation benefit first. Those furthest away bear the cost last. At the institutional level, the pattern becomes even clearer, because while individuals lost fortunes, the state itself emerged lighter. The debts that had once threatened to crush France had been transformed, converted, diluted through inflation and through the structure of the system itself. Creditors who had once held solid claims against the crown now held shares, and those shares had collapsed. In modern language, we might call this something familiar, a transfer from creditors to the sovereign, not through open default, but through the system, through design, through what would later be understood as financial repression. The effect was subtle, but profound. The state reduced its burden at the expense of those who had trusted it. And at the center of this stood power, not absolute, not omniscient, but decisive. Philippe II, Duke of Orleans, was not a villain in the simple sense. He did not set out to orchestrate a collapse. He believed, at least initially, in the system he had endorsed. He supported John Law as the solution to an impossible problem. And when that solution failed, he faced a different kind of crisis, not financial, but political. A population that had believed and lost, a system that had promised and broken, and a state that had to survive regardless. His response was not dramatic, it was not heroic, it was pragmatic. He allowed John Law to leave, quietly, avoiding the spectacle of punishment and the questions that would follow. He absorbed the anger, managed the aftermath, and slowly, through administration rather than vision, dismantled the most dangerous parts of the system. This, too, is a pattern. Power rarely collapses with the system. It adapts, it absorbs, it continues. And this is perhaps the most enduring lesson of all. Financial crises are not just about money. They are about structure, about who has access to information, to timing, to exit. Because in every bubble, there are three groups: those who build it, those who believe in it, and those who leave before it ends.
The tragedy of the Mississippi Scheme was not that people believed. Belief is necessary for any system to function. The tragedy was that belief was not equally informed, not equally positioned, not equally protected. And so, when the system failed, it did not fail for everyone. It failed selectively. The powerful adjusted, the informed escaped, the rest paid. This is not cynicism, it is structure, a pattern that has repeated again and again across centuries. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Because the next time a system begins to rise, the next time wealth appears rapidly, effortlessly, convincingly, the question is no longer, is this real, but rather, who benefits first? Who decides the rules, and who will still be holding the paper when the music stops? And with that, we arrive at the final reflection, not on what happened, but on what it means. When the Mississippi Scheme began to fail, it did not fail alone, because financial systems are never isolated. They are connected by credit, by trust, by expectation. And when one begins to fracture, the tremors travel. What started in Paris did not remain in Paris. The collapse moved outward, slowly by modern standards, but with a completeness that startled those who watched it unfold. Across Europe, confidence began to shift. Not collapse, not immediately, but tighten, withdraw, recalculate. In Britain, a mirror was already forming. The South Sea bubble, built on a structure strikingly similar to Law's, began to crack almost in tandem. A different nation, a different system, the same logic. And when both began to fail, the signal was unmistakable. This was not a local problem, it was structural. In Amsterdam, home to the most disciplined financial system in Europe, even the great exchange bank felt the pressure. Depositors withdrew, merchants consolidated, capital retreated towards safety. Because when uncertainty spreads, even the strongest institutions are tested. And then the deeper mechanism began to unfold, the one that repeats in every crisis. Credit tightened, loans were called in, assets were sold, prices fell, and those falling prices triggered the next wave. This is the architecture of contagion, simple but devastating. Falling asset values reduce collateral. Reduced collateral forces liquidation. Liquidation drives prices lower. Lower prices trigger further liquidation. A loop, self-reinforcing, relentless. In later centuries, thinkers would give this process a name. Hyman Minsky described it as the instability built into financial systems themselves, the tendency for stability to create risk, and for risk to unwind violently. But in 1720, they did not need theory. They watched it happen. Trade began to contract.
Bills of exchange, the lifeblood of European commerce, slowed. Merchants hesitated. Credit, once abundant, became scarce. And as credit shrank, so too did the real economy. Because this is the final stage of contagion, when finance stops being abstract and begins to touch everything. The shock moved across borders, carried not by ships alone, but by expectation. And though information traveled slowly, by horse, by sail, the delay did not prevent the crisis. It only stretched it, gave it time to settle into every corner of the system. In some ways, that slowness was a mercy. Markets had time to react, to adjust, to prepare.
Today, there is no such buffer. In modern systems, information moves instantly, and with it, panic. The same mechanisms that took months in 1720 can now unfold in hours, as the world witnessed during the 2008 global financial crisis. But the financial damage was only part of the story, because crises do not end with numbers, they end with consequences. In France, the collapse left something deeper than loss: resentment, distrust, a quiet but persistent rejection of financial innovation itself. The regent managed the aftermath, slowly unwinding the system, absorbing the shock. But the psychological damage remained, and it shaped everything that followed. For decades, France turned away from paper, away from credit expansion, away from the very mechanisms that had promised transformation. When the Banque de France was eventually established in 1800, it was designed in the shadow of failure. Conservative, restrained, anchored, a deliberate rejection of everything John Law had built. And here, another pattern emerges, one less obvious but equally important. Crises do not just destroy systems, they reshape them, often too far. France, scarred by the Mississippi collapse, became cautious, perhaps too cautious, while Britain, shaken but not broken by the South Sea bubble, continued to develop its financial institutions, refining them, expanding them, building the foundations of industrial finance. And over time, that divergence mattered, because capital, the ability to mobilize money into production, would become the defining force of the modern world. This is the hidden cost of collapse, not just what is lost, but what becomes impossible afterward. Fear replaces innovation, caution replaces growth, memory replaces momentum. The Mississippi scheme did not just crash a market, it altered a nation's relationship with money for generations. And this is the final stage of contagion, not financial, not economic, but institutional. The crisis spreads into memory, into policy, into the decisions of future generations who were not there, but still carry its weight. And once that happens, the system has not simply failed, it has rewritten the future. Now, we come to the end of the journey, not with the collapse, but with the meaning behind it. There is a temptation at the end of every financial catastrophe to simplify it, to say, paper money is a lie.
Financiers are frauds, markets are madness. Clean conclusions, comforting ones, and completely wrong. Because the truth of the Mississippi scheme is far more unsettling. John Law was not wrong, not in the way history often remembers him. He was not a charlatan chasing illusion. He was something far more dangerous. He was early. He understood something that his world did not yet fully grasp, that money is not metal, that gold and silver are not wealth themselves, but representations of it, that economies do not grow because they possess gold, but because they possess liquidity, movement, circulation. He saw that scarcity of money could suffocate an economy, that expanding the money supply carefully, deliberately, could unlock production, employment, and growth. That credit was not deception, it was potential. And history has proven him right. Every modern central bank operates on this principle. The Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of England, all of them manage money. All of them create liquidity. All of them operate, in essence, on ideas that trace back to law. So, if he was right, why did it fail? Because being right is not enough. John Law did not fail in theory. He failed in scale, in speed, in structure. He tried to build in a few years what would take centuries to stabilize, a system dependent on confidence without the institutions required to sustain it. He fused money with speculation, bound the value of the currency to the value of a company whose future profits were uncertain, unverified, imagined. He allowed prices to rise far beyond reality, creating a gap vast, invisible, and fatal between what was promised and what could ever be delivered. And most critically, he underestimated people, not their greed, but their intelligence. The most sophisticated actors saw the divergence. They understood the difference between paper and reality, and they acted. They exited. They protected themselves, leaving behind those who believed, holding assets that could not hold their value. This was not stupidity, it was asymmetry of information, of timing, of access. And this is the real fracture line in every financial system, not between belief and disbelief, but between those who see early and those who see too late. But even this is not the deepest truth, because what John Law attempted did not disappear with his failure. It evolved. Over the next 3 centuries, the world did something remarkable. It built the system he needed, slowly, painfully, institution by institution. Legal frameworks, central bank independence, risk supervision, global coordination, structures designed to do what his system could not, manage confidence without losing control of it. Institutions like the Bank for International Settlements exist for this reason, to prevent the kind of systemic failure that destroyed his experiment. And yet, here is the final revelation. Even with all of this, the problem has not been solved, because the force that created the Mississippi scheme still exists. A government under pressure, debt that cannot easily be resolved, a financial system capable of innovation, and a solution that operates at the edge of confidence. This is not an accident of history, it is a structure. and structures do not disappear. They reappear in new forms, in new markets, under new names. The safeguards we have built do not eliminate the problem. They manage it, contain it, delay it. But in that delay, new imbalances form, new pressures build, new systems stretch toward their limits, until one day they meet a condition they were not designed for, and then the cycle begins again. This is the truth the Mississippi Scheme leaves behind. Not that the system was false, but that it was unfinished. Not that money is illusion, but that it is trust. And trust, no matter how sophisticated the system that surrounds it, is never permanent. It must be maintained, reinforced, earned again and again. Because when trust becomes assumption, and assumption becomes certainty, and certainty drifts too far from reality, the collapse is not a question of if, only of when. And that is the inheritance of John Law. Not a failed system, but a warning, one that echoes every time a new era convinces itself that it has finally escaped the past.
The Long Shadow. John Law died in Venice in 1729. Far from Paris, far from power, far from the system that had once made him the most influential financial mind in Europe. There is something fitting about that ending. Venice, once the great engine of Mediterranean commerce, had already begun its long decline, its dominance eroded by the rise of oceanic trade, by the very forces that Law had tried to harness through empire, through credit, through the vast promise of global expansion. The architect of a new financial world ending his life in the fading shadow of an old one. He left behind no monument, no institution bearing his name, no legacy that his contemporaries were eager to preserve. Only a failure, or so it seemed, because in the decades that followed, his ideas were not celebrated. They were dismissed. Adam Smith, writing in The Wealth of Nations, treated Law's system with open contempt. Understandably, the collapse had been too large, too visible, too damaging. And so the lesson that survived was the wrong one. That paper money was dangerous, that credit was suspect, that innovation was reckless. It would take nearly 2 centuries for the deeper truth to be rediscovered. Only in the 20th century, as economics matured into a formal discipline, did thinkers begin to look again, carefully, without the emotional weight of collapse. And what they found was not madness, but insight. Antoine Murphy, Thomas Sargent, scholars who revisited Law not as a failure, but as a pioneer, a man who had seen the future before the world was ready to build it. Because that is what the Mississippi Scheme truly was, a proof, a demonstration that paper money could work, that expanding liquidity could stimulate real economic activity, that financial systems could, in principle, solve problems that traditional methods could not. And it did work, for a time. The French economy grew, trade expanded, activity increased, the system functioned, until it didn't. And in that collapse, another truth was revealed, that these powers, the ability to create money,
to expand credit, to reshape economies, come with risks so large that no single system, no single institution, no single mind can safely control them alone. This is the legacy, not success, not failure, but exposure. An early encounter with forces that humanity would spend the next 3 centuries trying to understand and contain. Because what followed 1720 was not retreat, it was construction. Slowly, unevenly, imperfectly, the world began to build the infrastructure that law had lacked. Regulation, oversight, central banking systems, crisis management frameworks, an architecture designed to do one thing: harness financial innovation without allowing it to destroy itself. And yet, that work is not finished. It may never be finished. Because the problem is not static, it evolves. Every new instrument, every new market, every new innovation creates new gaps, new risks, new blind spots. The Banque Royale issued paper no one knew how to measure. Centuries later, modern systems created instruments no one fully understood. Different forms, same structure. The distance between innovation and regulation remains, and it always will. This is the legacy the Mississippi Scheme casts across history. Not a warning about one man, but about a gap that cannot be permanently closed, only managed. And so what we inherit from John Law is not a moral lesson, not a condemnation, but a responsibility. To look at our own systems with clarity, with skepticism, with memory. Because the dream he sold was not false, it was real. A world powered by credit, by liquidity, by the expansion of money beyond metal. That world exists. It is this world. And the question he leaves us with is not whether the dream was possible. It is whether the structures we have built at this moment are strong enough to hold it. Because somewhere, in every era, there is a street like Rue Quincecamp. It may not look the same, it may not sound the same, but it is there. A place where belief gathers, where prices rise, where confidence feels unbreakable, until it isn't. The crowds are gone now. The noise has faded. The paper has turned to history. But the forces that filled that street have not gone anywhere at all.